Hello, hello. This is M.E.C, and you're listening to the Well-Being Podcast. My goodness, it has been a long time since I have said that. Probably like a year and a half, I think. Minimum. I'm here in my sweats, no makeup, PJs. I'm like very raw right now. And this is something I'm challenging myself to do because I'm talking about something that makes me uncomfortable, but also that I think requires like a certain level of realness, and that is failure. A rather recent and significant failure that I have experienced that has impacted my ability to talk to y'all, which is something I really enjoy. So, yeah, I stopped recording because I felt like a failure because I had experienced this large failure. So that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about failure. This episode will be kind of more casual, a little bit more rawness to it. I'm working on being okay with it not being like perfect. And so just like bear with me. But yeah, I stopped recording because I felt like a fraud, because I fell victim to the very stigma that I'm supposed to be opposing, which is mental health stigma. Um, Long story short, I did not pass a very large exam in medical school the first time I took it. And I was diagnosed with ADHD. I got treated. I passed the exam. But like during that whole period of time, I think I really beat myself up over even like failing and like the like reason behind the failure, and then like the things that impacted the reasons why I had the failure. And so we're talking about that. I know that sounds really meta, but I'm just being honest. So I think it's fair to start by being like, why did you start this podcast in the first place? Yeah, the reason I started the podcast was because during my second year of medical school, I experienced my first patient death. The first time I had cared for a patient for like a while, and then they passed away. And I was doing a lot of reflecting over that loss and like just life in general. Um, and I remember I just had a lot of thoughts that I was like, gosh, like time is so finite. Like, what are things I would have told my younger self, or things I wish I would have known? And I was really struggling to like journal them because I'll have a whole episode on why journaling and we have issues, but I'm working on it. It's just hard to write down things. It makes them concrete. I feel like I should reread them, and I don't really often like rereading thoughts that are unpleasant. Whole thing like that. And I was like, some of these things just need to be said with a voice, in my opinion. And so I was like, podcast. So weird, but I'm going to do it. And so that's why I started the podcast in the first place. For the past year and a half, what has been occurring? Well, the world has been like ending, it feels like multiple times. Like you're like, okay, humanitarian event that is horrible after traumatic group grief, after insert physical ailments that are sweeping the nation. It just like, I feel like at a certain point, I'm like, like a girl's exhausted. I'm sure you're exhausted. The whole world's exhausted of being exhausted. I've lived through like now 3 supposed ends of the world. 1999, people said that like 2006 was going to be that big thing. 2012 was supposed to be a big issue, blah, blah, blah. I have never felt more close to the world being like on fire than I have right now. And so then like, okay, I'm doing clinical rotations at the same time as, things are falling into chaos. I was making content at the time, which was like exhausting and mentally draining to kind of like balance those two things. I was taking exams in medical school, which are hard, but I'm pushing. And I'm noticing that I'm starting to do not as great on those exams, but I'm still juggling all these things. And then everything came to a screeching halt because I did not pass an exam that I needed to pass to apply to residency programs, which basically like means the thing between me and becoming a psychiatrist was this exam. And this exam had hands, and I did not pass. And that's like where everything just stopped. I was like, okay, we are cutting out everything. You're not making content. You're not like watching shows. You're not like we are doing nothing Nothing new, nothing fun. You're not allowed to until you pass the exam. I just remember opening up that email. I remember where I was. I remember like where I was sitting, like what row I was in the lecture hall when I opened up my laptop and I checked and I didn't pass. And I was devastated. But I was really, I think the first thing I was shock. I was just kind of like, I looked at it, I closed my laptop, I opened it again, I opened the email again, I read it again. Just like disbelief. But also, I kind of knew. Like, I did not feel confident when I took this exam at all. And I was having a really hard time with the attention aspect. This is a like 8-9 hour exam. This content is like dense. Okay. It's like half of it's like rote memory, and the other half is like I need to think through this patient vignette and like figure out what I need to be doing next, or like what the problem is. What is this showing me? It requires a lot of my brain. And I was finding that I was getting so tired taking these exams. I even studying for the exams, I could not stay awake. I mean, my fiance would have to wake me up probably like 6 times a day because I would keep falling asleep when I was studying for this. And even during the exam, I remember it's an 8-hour exam and you get a 45-minute break. You get a 45-minute break. And I took 20 of those 45 minutes and I took a nap. And I was like, something's wrong. Something's wrong. But whatever. I just remember sitting in stillness and calling my dad and being like, I did not pass. And like just feeling like, oh my God. This is wild. And I think that's like where I was like, I went into fix it mode. I like crawled to my dean's office at the ready and was like, all right, I'm ready to be put in study jail. I'm putting my whole life on hold. Like I said, I mean, I really didn't even watch like new shows, like TV shows for like a whole year, like a whole, like the entire period. Like I think I rewatched Pokemon and Inuyasha. Like you think I'm joking, but I think I rewatched like the same Let's Plays. I did not allow myself to consume new content. I was like, you're not making content. You're not allowed to enjoy things that are new during this period of time. No. Because I thought that's what I need to do. I was like, okay, if I just buckle down and like strip everything away, I'll be able to surpass this. Then I started feeling very shameful, as people do when you don't pass something or when you experience a failure. And I think the shame also, I want to focus a little bit heavier on the shame part because it's nuanced and it is also impacted by intersectionality, which is big words for I have lots of different identities as a person. I am a medical student, but I'm also a Black person in America. And I'm also Afro-Caribbean. And I'm like a first generation American or second generation immigrant. I'm also a woman. Okay. Like all these identities overlap, right? And have their own like little sets of implications or stereotypes, blah, blah, blah. And I think the two that I was really struggling with was being Black and being like also an immigrant, because I was like, okay, one, my parents did not come to this country for me to be failing an exam that I should be passing. I felt enormous guilt and shame about that. And I also felt shame because like knowing that I'm an underrepresented individual in medicine, I don't see a lot of people in the hospital who look like me, who are physicians or who are in positions of leadership. And like knowing that I kind of represent like that minority in general is something I don't take lightly. It's something I can't take lightly because society is constantly like reminding you of it. And I was like, people might already think that I got into medical school because, I wasn't supposed to be here, but, because of some sort of initiative, like I got in with like lower credentials, which is not the case. And I truly don't believe that. And that rhetoric still impacts you, even if you know it's not true. I am very wary of engaging in any activities or like publicly displaying things that make people question my intelligence specifically, because I'm very aware of this dynamic. I don't want to be treated like, oh, that's like the Black kid who got in because, we just had a diversity initiative and therefore they're not as smart, but like they got in, because I've been told that to my face. I've been told that to my face, and I will not forget when someone said that to me. And all the other times, like very many times, that was implied heavily through like subtleties and things like that. That is something I take very seriously. And so I think this exam is a huge exam. People get tutors, people get like pay for software and like classes, and they like go to like a bunch of different like sessions to like learn how to do stuff for this exam. But a lot of people also just study by themselves, and they do well and they do fine and everyone passes. It's assumed that everyone passes because everyone who graduates from medical school has passed this exam. And I was like, I don't want to be like using a bunch of resources because optically, I don't want people to think I need extra help. I don't need your extra help. I got in here of my own merit. I'm smart. I don't need people having more reasons to be like, oh, well, you had to utilize this, and this to do well. I was like, nah. And the thing is, do I feel like that was a conscious choice that I was making? No. But do I think that the way in which I interacted with resources that might have existed that could have helped me earlier was heavily impacted by that mentality? Yes. And it was something I was not actively aware of. And this is something we call internalized racial oppression. Basically, it's like having a chip on your shoulder that's like, well, I think this is how you're going to see me because of racism. So I'm going to directly try to oppose that. And then I might end up like hurting myself, not seeking out the resources I need to seek out, just because I'm trying to uphold this positive, perception of myself as a person of color, right? That's one of the ways it can show up. And I think that really impacted me because would I have gone to my dean earlier knowing that I was struggling to get through these long study sessions? Yes, I probably would have. But I didn't want this person, like my dean or like anyone at my school, to be like, oh, this person's like at risk. There's like the at risk, like Black student and like that kind of thing. And that was so off-putting to me that it prevented me from going and seeking out resources. And I think that's huge. I think that's a huge aspect of this entire narrative, which is why I'm sharing it. So I just said, okay, I'm ready to fix it. We like made a plan. I like went to the dean. This is what we're going to study. This is how you're going to study. This is how you're going to do it. All right, fine. I went off and was like, okay, I'm going to go enact this plan. So I restart studying. And I'm realizing there's still a problem because I'm still like doing the same, like I'm not performing the way I'm supposed to. And I'm like, what's wrong here? I have now cleared out all of these distractions. I'm focused in on this one thing I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm still finding it incredibly difficult to focus my attention on this for long periods of time. I'm like constantly like dragging back my attention. It's like if someone's like pushing your head and you're trying to look at something and someone's just constantly pushing your head and you're spending a lot of energy on just trying to look where you're supposed to be focusing rather than what you're actually supposed to be focusing on. That's how I would describe this. And my fiance and my roommate took me aside and said, hey, I do think you need to go see somebody and potentially be tested for any sort of learning disability, ADHD, like something that's affecting your ability to focus, because this is obviously really distressing to you. And I honestly got really upset. I got really upset by this. I got really defensive because I have done well up until this point. And I was like, I don't need to have like more labels on me. Like I already have like the anxiety and OCD thing. And like, that's my like allocated mental illness quota. Thank you very much. I'm good. But I was not good. I was not being able to do the work. So I saw a psychiatrist for the first time. I have seen therapists in the past, but I've never seen a psychiatrist, which was a very interesting experience. And I'll say this because I'm training to be a psychiatrist. So like it's weird and meta when you're like getting analyzed by someone else and they're giving me like surveys to take that I give to patients to take. I could score it myself and know like, oh yes, anxiety's high, depression high, whatever. It's just weird to be in that situation. But also it is very necessary to externalize that. Like I'm not no one is fit to be their own psychiatrist, let's be completely fair. Um but it just like felt weird, and like knowing that vulnerability was weird. Okay, this is months are going by at this point. I get recommended for ADHD testing. Actually navigating the ADHD testing process is something I will talk about at a different time because it was incredibly difficult until I had the insurance that matched with the testing I needed to get done. It is incredibly expensive. It is incredibly difficult to get. The wait list for me was like initially over a year long for like the open access version. It was a pain in my butt. Okay. I get tested. I have mild ADHD. Okay, fine. We fast forward. They are like, okay, we're going to add a different medication onto your current regimen. And I was also against this. I was very concerned about this, which is very interesting for a person who's going into psychiatry to feel this way. Because I think that medications are incredibly useful tools. They change people's lives for the better. And I think that there is a vulnerability that comes with taking a new medication. It is not a small deal. It's a pretty big deal. Like it's something that you're committing to like having influence your life moving forward so that you can succeed. And it may or may not work and you don't know. And so like that was really hard for me. And so I just want to like acknowledge if you're like feeling like this push and pull between like I know like mental health medication is helpful and useful and I still feel apprehensive. Like two things can be true. Like I think that's the whole story of this is like two things can be true. I just like resonate heavily with you and I'm probably going to make an episode about that just because I get it. Okay, so they add on said medication for ADHD. I'm able to stay awake. I'm able to stay focused. I'm like, this makes sense. I can't believe I was like, this is how other people are supposed to be focusing. This is so much less mental effort to corral my attention. And so then I started doing better on exams. I'm seeing the progress. I'm like, thank God. Because at a certain point, I was like, I feel like I'm banging my head against a wall. I'm like doing all the stuff I'm supposed to be doing and it's still not working. Then you get a tool, in this case, ADHD medication. And then suddenly you're like, okay, it's clicking. It makes sense. It wasn't just me. So that was helpful. Okay, I take the exam. I pass. Yay! Okay, it's over. It's done. I passed the exam. But there was a period of time, I would say like for a whole 2-3 months after I passed the exam, I still didn't like allow myself to like act like I had passed the exam because I was like, this could be taken away from me at any moment. Maybe they graded it wrong. Maybe there was a mistake and I actually didn't pass because I had really just kind of like brainwashed myself into thinking like, I have problems taking tests and I will not be able to do well on tests from here on out. There is something very strong to be said about the way that we expect to perform and the way that we perform. It is so hard to do well if you think you're not going to do well. The confidence that you have in taking an exam, like the anxiety that you have in taking an exam or like approaching something that you failed before is so profound and so underrated. People talk about perseverance all the time as if it's super easy, which irritates me. I don't know if you were told this as a child, but I was constantly told like perseverance is what happens when you try and try again, even when it's hard, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool, cute, whatever. But it's even harder to try the next time. Because let's say like the first time I took this exam, okay, was I the most prepared for the exam? No. The second time I took the exam, I was so nervous. I was like, there's a whole nother aspect on top of like, can I perform in this exam? I'm now thinking like, What happens if I fail again? I failed in the past. This could repeat itself. What does that say about me? What does it say about my future? Am I like, there are so many other things that like compile. And so I don't think people like talk about like the fact that trying again often is harder than trying the first time. So yeah, that was rough. And then like, after the exam, I was like, okay, I'm slowly allowing myself to enjoy things again. I am now out of this realm of quote unquote acute failure, and I'm applying to residency programs for psychiatry. I'm interviewing. I mean, to be frank, you have to like list, it shows up that you didn't pass this exam the first time. And that's considered a big red flag. And so you have the option to provide context or not. I think context is everything. Explaining like the process that I went through, the fact that I had a diagnosis, I got the treatment I needed, and then I succeeded. Huge, huge context important to say. And I was incredibly, incredibly nervous about putting that on my exam because disclosure in the medical community is a big, it's still very heavily stigmatized. And I almost felt like I felt really weird about disclosing because I feel very comfortable in this particular like context, right? Socially, I feel very fine disclosing the fact that I have ADHD and that I have OCD symptoms and anxiety because like at a certain point if it helps somebody else like myself, that's what matters to me. And when you're applying for these jobs and you're like literally signing up, you're paying money for people to judge you, people could perceive that in different ways. Be like, oh, this person has too many issues and therefore we shouldn't hire them. It's a really big problem. And I went through a lot of discussions with my advisors and my parents and myself about how I was going to phrase this and like what am I going to disclose and what am I choosing, blah, blah, to say. Um, and like on interviews, it does come up. It is something that like I'm expected to share about. And I relive opening that email and those like 6 months of like getting diagnosed and being apprehensive about taking medication and things like that. And I have to like kind of like condense that as much as I can and present it on a platter and be like, either you like it or you don't. But this is where I am. This is who I am. This is where I am. This is something that affected me and I've worked on it and I'm happy that it's over. But yeah, it did happen. And I'm glad that it happened at least early enough for me to be able to fix it in a way that it didn't harm anybody else. I was able to retake this exam, things like that. But I think I felt, I felt once again like fraudulent, I think to a degree, because I talk about addressing mental health stigma and then yet I'm being affected by it a lot myself. Am I like really practicing what I preach and like being open about these things while also putting myself in a position where I can succeed and help other people in the future as a psychiatrist because I kind of need a psych residency to do that. And like honestly, people have been way more understanding of it than I thought. But it's still just like a really big thing to like put on a piece of paper and just send it off, and you don't know who's going to respond well to it. And I think also talking about this in the span of the world seeming like it's ending and like it's on fire and like there's all these huge problems that are going on, and then I'm like, boohoo, I didn't pass an exam and it tore up my confidence and now I have to take medication and now I'm fine. I was concerned about how tone deaf that would feel, even though this heavily impacted like the past year and a half of my life. So yeah, that's my whole narrative of acute failure that I've dealt with recently. And, the way that I was able to kind of summarize or like cope with sharing this is that, the world is going to keep turning. And as long as I'm here, my thoughts are going to keep coming. Not all thoughts are worth paying attention to. Something I've happily learned from OCD therapy, like not all thoughts need to be paid attention to. And yet, if I have something to say, if I have a thought that helps me process or helps other people process, I'm going to say it. I'm going to share it. Um, like knowing and being like mindful about what I'm saying. Um, and so that's why I really wanted to share this. I think that the overarching narrative is kind of like, I had this diagnosis that I was unaware of, but I kind of was like also really falling into behaviors that society had kind of encouraged because I didn't want to be seen as weak and I didn't want to be seen as like damaged or, oh, like you're too ill or something like that. Um, and like utilizing resources that I should have had access to and should have been comfortable accessing. Um, I just think it says a lot about the way we interact with failure in general. Um, and I feel like much more comfortable talking about it now, and like addressing it. But I think the initial shame um, is weird because people are like, well, then why? If you didn't pass, then why? And everyone feels like they're entitled to the answer why. Like, and I feel comfortable sharing why. There are other people who are not comfortable or not at that space or not, it's not safe for them to say those things. Um, it's not safe for them to express why. Like I said, this is a very raw episode. And yeah, I just wanted this to kind of like start off season 2 of the Wellbeing Podcast. So thank you for being there, for messages that were sent when I was on this kind of impromptu hiatus. I know everyone's always like, oh, I'm leaving, and this is this big reason why I left. And like, I don't think that that really matters for me because I'm like not of large importance. However, I do think that this experience was worth sharing. So yeah, failure is weird. Um, and I don't think it's over. I don't think like I'm like post. I think at any point something could come out of left field and be like, here's a significant difficulty. But I did learn a lot about myself through the process. So if you're experiencing something like this or recently have or have in the past, would love to hear about it. I have a Substack that I have now established for the Wellbeing Podcast. So would love to see you on there. Has more thoughts, some more informal blurb videos. Yeah, just love to hear from you. And as always, you've got this. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.